Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 131. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this podcast where we talk about new movies, new films that come out in streaming or in theaters. On this podcast, we'll kind of break it out into two different parts. First part of the podcast, I'll give you my non-spoiler thoughts about the new film. If you haven't seen it, hopefully this non-spoiler section will kind of give you an insight as to whether you should check it out in theaters or maybe you should skip it. And then the second part of the podcast will delve into a little bit more in depth of the actual movie that we're covering. I'll give you some pros and cons, give you some of my favorite moments, and then at the end, wrap it all up and decide, is this movie, after one viewing, timeless? Does it stand the test of time to be rewatched multiple times in the future? Before we jump into this week's episode, though, I did want to call out that episode 130 of the Timeless Movie Podcast is available on all platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. Go give us a follow, subscribe, like the videos, leave some comments. Would love to interact with you guys about the various movies that I've already covered. Speaking of previous episodes, 130 is about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. My brother Omar ended up joining me on that podcast. We had a lot of fun talking about it. So let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of our thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. All right, let's go ahead and jump in to this week's episode in which we are covering A24's newest film, the comedy called Friendship. This one is directed by Andrew DeYoung, and it stars Paul Rudd, Tim Robinson, and a slew of different actors that come out in this film as well. Now, A24 has had a kind of, at least in my personal opinion, maybe for you guys that are listening, maybe you disagree with me, and that's totally fine. So far for me in 2025, A24 has been a little hit and miss. Hits for me, Warfare was an incredible 90-minute experience. Some misses, Death of a Unicorn, just didn't find that one funny. And then there's also a couple of films in the middle, like Opus, which was also distributed by A24, which I thought was neither good nor bad, just right in the middle. And so now we have this movie, Friendship. And I will say that as soon as the trailer came out for this one and I saw it, I was I was just hooked on this movie. I could not wait. All I needed to see was one trailer. Every time there was a new either trailer that came out in theaters or anything that came up as an ad, I did not want to see it because I already had the idea in my head that, okay, this is going to be some type of a weird comedy, which might kind of delve into a little bit of these kind of horror or thriller elements. And so I was all in. And so that is kind of my initial kind of breakdown as to why I wanted to watch this movie. It looked funny. I've been saying for a while, and maybe I haven't said it in at least the last couple of episodes, but we need more comedies. I feel like we're always kind of inundated with so many different action movies, sci-fi, and it's nothing wrong with those type of movies. Those are typically the ones that I enjoy the most. But I feel like as compared to maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we don't have as many comedies as we used to. This year, we started off with a great comedy in One of Them Days starring SZA and Keke Palmer. And so let's hope that we get more of these types of just straight comedy type films. All right, with all that said, I think this is a great segue into the non-spoiler section of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit high level on what I thought about after I left the theaters watching Friendship. Okay, just right off the bat, I gotta say that after I checked out Friendship, I thought this movie was freaking hilarious. Every single scene just felt like it was infused with this cringy and awkward type of social moments. You have Tim Robinson playing Craig Waterman, and it's just all these socially awkward situations. And what's so funny is that I actually do not like that type of humor. I don't like seeing these cringy moments or these types of situations that are very awkward and that just give you secondhand embarrassment. I actually really don't like that. Yet, when I was watching this movie, it was filled with those types of moments, and I could not look away. I kept wanting to see where the heck Craig was going to go in this story. I wanted to see more of his interactions with Austin. Austin is played by Paul Rudd. Whenever they were together, it was just always something funny going on. Another thing I got to call out, other than it just being a very great comedy, is I thought the story was really simple. It didn't try to overcomplicate it. It does have a couple of areas where maybe it might want the audience to kind of interpret what might be going on. Maybe I'm off base on that, but I kind of felt like there was a couple of things that, is it real? Is it not? What is Craig really experiencing in this moment? So I really enjoyed that. Again, just keeping it very straightforward, but still having those kind of moments where, what the heck is Craig experiencing? And is this all actually just in his head in some ways? All right, let me go ahead and jump into a little bit of a synopsis. Again, just in case you have not seen Friendship, hopefully this kind of little plot detail might give you an understanding as to what the film is about. The story revolves around this character named Craig, played by Tim Robinson. Craig is a father and a husband. He is actually selling his house. I believe that they live in Colorado, but he's basically selling his house, and then he ends up getting a package that is delivered to the wrong address. So he ends up going down the street to his neighbor, and he delivers the package, and it's actually a new neighbor that he has not gotten to meet, and that neighbor is Austin, played by Paul Rudd. In this first interaction, you kind of get to see a little bit of the humor between Paul Rudd and Tim Robinson, but it's just a little small detail. And then after Craig goes back home, he finds out later that night that Austin actually called and invited him over to get a drink. And his wife, Tammy, played by Kate Mara, is the one that actually pushed him to go out and hang out with Austin. Initially, Craig was really hesitant. He's like, I don't want to do that. You don't know my plans. And then eventually he goes out on that drink and he hangs out with Austin, and they end up making a connection. They talk about these different types of things that they're going through in their jobs. They're talking about things that they want to accomplish. And then eventually they just hit it off. And, it starts kind of getting a little bit better for Austin because he feels like Craig is a good luck charm. He gets a new job in the morning news. He's actually a weatherman. And then he invites him over to his house and he hangs out with some of his other friends that Austin might have. And in that specific social event, what ends up happening is that Craig ends up kind of embarrassing himself. Then bad things start happening to both characters to the point where Austin eventually just goes up to Craig and says, I think we should no longer be friends. Let's just kind of have our own space and move on. And Craig just almost his life really starts spiraling out of control. He starts kind of losing his job, losing all this stuff, and all of these bad mishaps start happening in his life, all because of this relationship with Austin. And so that's kind of where I'll leave the story. Again, there's a lot of different things that happen, a lot of hilarious scenes and dialogue that gets said in this movie, but I'll save that for when you guys check it out. Overall, I enjoyed this experience so much of watching both Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd just put on such great performances with their characters. Everything that Tim Robinson would do with his face is just the facial reactions, the way that he would scream. It was just so funny. And I just kept wanting to see how far he would take it. Again, it is very cringy. And so I guess I'll kind of move into my recommendation. If you guys are okay with cringe, with these awkward social situations that characters might go through, if you're okay with that in your comedy and your movies and your stories, then I highly recommend you guys give this one a shot. Check it out in theaters. It is freaking funny. And again, comedy is subjective. What's funny for me might not be funny for you, but I just hope that you guys have a chance. If there's a theater that's running this movie, give it a shot. It is so damn good. And again, if you are not a fan of cringy and really secondhand embarrassment type of humor, then maybe just stay away from this one. All right, those are all of my non-spoiler thoughts. Hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea if you have not checked it out. For those that have checked out Friendship, though, let's go ahead and now talk a little bit more in spoiler territory and go into pros and cons. If you have not seen the movie, please jump out now, watch the movie, come back, and then in the comments below, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts and opinions. Okay, let's go ahead. First pro for Friendship is got to be, I thought they nailed the interactions between Craig and all of the characters around him, as well as the awkward situations that he was put in. Again, the comedy, it works for me. And so again, it's obviously a very easy pro, but I kind of wanted to delve a little bit deeper than just saying, yeah, the movie's funny. Well, why is the movie funny? Sometimes it is dialogue, but most of the time it's those awkward and weird situations that Craig is in this film. Whether he's interacting with Austin and his friends, whether he's having a fight with the mayor of the city that he lives in, whether he's trying to invite a 18-year-old guy to a bar in order to just have a fun night because he misses hanging out with Austin. So many different interactions that just feel so weird and awkward, and it just I would hate to be in that kind of a position. I'm the kind of person that does feel secondhand embarrassment, but again, I could not stop laughing. I could not stop this feeling of like wanting to laugh and feel this certain way for Craig, the character, and yet even in those situations, there was times where it would make you feel bad as well. So I thought the interactions that he was in, the characters around Craig and how he would talk to them and interact with them, they just nailed that part of it. One of the reasons why I think they nail it is how great the writing and the dialogue is. Nothing feels like it's like a punchline. Nothing feels like it's, oh, I'm setting up a joke here. It all feels like just a natural conversation, a natural discussion between characters. And you can actually, at least maybe in your life, kind of feel that you've either seen people have these types of discussions or have these conversations with coworkers or with family members. But just that whole situation of having this writing and dialogue just works so well, I think feeds into why this movie is so funny. One thing that I just keep thinking about when it comes to like the writing and the dialogue is this interaction that Craig has with this character named Tony. Tony is the 18-year-old kid. He works at a little cell phone shop and he's selling Craig a phone. And Craig just, at one point, he's down in the dumps. Austin is no longer his friend because of all the things that he's done to him, and he's kind of ruined his life at that moment in time of the movie. But he's so down in the dumps that he feels like he needs to do something. He needs to, other than just smoke cigarettes, he wants to do something a lot harder. And so he goes up to Tony. Tony had let him know in a previous scene that, hey, if you want something strong, let me know. And he ends up selling Craig the toad that he can lick in order to have a trippy experience. And so before that even happens, Tony ends up going down this whole dialogue like, hey, my friends call me Tony, but when my hair's down, they call me T-Boy. So it's just all this ridiculous dialogue, but it just works so well because both Tony and Craig are kind of playing into it. That whole interaction of Craig getting the drug, having a trippy experience, he ends up having a vision of him going to Subway and ordering everything within that specific moment just works so well. And again, it kind of just all encompasses the great writing, the great dialogue, and the interactions between the various characters. So long-winded answer to just tell you that this movie is funny, but there's levels to why it's funny. It's not just punchlines. It is all these ridiculous interactions that Craig is going through in this movie that just kept me laughing throughout. All right, second pro for me is although the movie is predominantly a comedy, surprisingly though, there is bits and pieces of horror and thriller elements and almost like psychological aspects as well. The film kind of dips its toe in different areas. For example, there are scenes where early on in the relationship between Austin and Craig, when they're having a good time and they're enjoying their company, they end up going down the sewers of the city that they live in. Apparently, Austin likes to explore the city that he gets to, that he's living in, and he wants to know it a little bit more. And so he found these sewer systems that connect to different places in the city. So he invites Craig, and when they're in these sewers, the framing and the filming of these scenes almost feels like it's a horror movie because every scene feels very claustrophobic. Everything feels so close. And then what's so crazy is that Craig, after he does not have the friend of Austin anymore, wants to go on an adventure. And so he takes his wife, Tammy, down these same sewers. And then in those specific scenes, it just feels very creepy because at one point, you have Craig yelling at his wife, Tammy, why don't you ever want to do anything fun? Why don't you ever want to just explore? And you have Tammy has a little bit of the high ground because she's on a specific, section of the sewers. And she's just looking down at Craig. And she gives one of the most dark and dirty looks I've seen. And then the music kind of kicks in and it feels like very horror. And it almost feels like Tammy's going to do something like, oh, okay, I see what you said there. And well, now you're going to pay for it. And so it felt very ominous. And then there's also scenes where in that same process where Craig is trying to find his wife in the sewers, he's going through and he's trying to use his flashlight to find her. And again, the music kicks in and it feels very creepy, like if you're just got dropped into a horror movie. So I really enjoyed that they kind of dabbled into those specific parts of feeling very creepy, very eerie, where you didn't know where the hell the story was going to go. And then, then it would drop you back into the cringy jokes that were being done or the awkward situations that played out for Craig. So really love that. And so that's kind of my second pro, is just the various different horror and thriller elements that they were able to include within the film. All right. Then the last pro that I have, this one might be really off base, and I completely understand if it is. This is just how my brain was kind of connecting the dots. But Craig is in the film, he works as like an executive manager for a company that makes apps. And he at one point tells Austin, "Hey, I make apps, but we try to make them to bring people back into the app. And if they lose attention, we try to make a different feature to bring them back in." And Austin kind of clearly calls him out and says, like an addiction, like you're making them addicted to these apps. I found it very funny that basically Craig in this film, instead of getting addicted to apps, he was addicted to Austin and the friendship. As soon as he started hanging out with Austin and he got to see how cool Austin was as a weatherman, he had his own band, he collected different types of artifacts. So Craig got a taste of this relationship, and then once it was cut off, what did he do? He tried to almost emulate Austin. He tried to buy his own artifacts. He tried to invite his coworkers and friends from work to his house to have a kind of a social bond, and it never worked. And so I almost feel like he was addicted to the relationship of Austin. He was addicted to just being with him, being his friend. He wanted to feel that rush. And again, I know that's maybe it's obvious, but I feel like that was kind of like the connection that the movie is trying to make, is that, it doesn't only just come from drugs where you get addicted to, but it's really even friendships, even relationships that you have with people, and how this can kind of really, if you're a troubled person like Craig is, sometimes you might take it too far. And so I really kind of like that type of aspect of theming of it. Maybe I'm wrong, and let me know in the comments if I'm just way off on that kind of a pro. All right, let's go ahead and now move on to cons very quickly. I don't have any notes. I don't really have anything that, really was on my mind in regards to what I may have not liked or anything that I wanted to nitpick. Again, always want to clear this up by saying just because I don't have any cons doesn't mean that it's a perfect movie. It just means that I don't have anything that really bogged down the entire experience of friendship. So very quickly, we will move past cons, and now let's go ahead and jump into some awards. Who are the MVPs of this film, or really one MVP, best moment as well as best shot? Let's go ahead and segue into MVP. This one's very easy for me. It is Tim Robinson as Craig Waterman. I have not seen Tim Robinson in his show. I believe it's called I Think You Should Leave. I haven't seen it. I've seen so many clips of it, and I keep telling myself that I should watch it, but man, he is just so good in this specific role of a awkward individual, like somebody that just has these very interesting facial reactions, and no matter what he's doing, even when he's trying to be serious or trying to be somebody that has a lot of energy, it just makes me laugh. He just has this look on his face that, it's hilarious. And then it gets even more outlandish when he starts kind of yelling and he's like, "I don't even know who you are," or things of that nature. It's like, it just makes it for such a fun experience. So Tim Robinson, had my favorite performance of the entire movie. He is the MVP. And again, he's really the main character of this entire story. But there's just so many moments like that where you could see him trying to change. You could see him being very troubled. Like he wants to almost find an identity for himself, but he feels like, oh no, my identity is being friends with Austin. And so I want to do what he does because he looks like he's having such a great time in his life, and I want to do the same. And so how Tim Robinson is able to pull that off is it's just awesome. So he is the MVP of friendship. All right, let's go ahead and segue into the award for best scene or moment. There's so many that I can choose from. I'm pretty sure I'll kind of change and flip-flop as I think more and more about the movie. But the first one that kind of comes to my head is there's a scene where they're having a little welcome home party for Tammy because she ended up getting lost in the sewers, and they ended up finding her, and she is safe and sound. And at the party, everybody's hanging out, but Craig is in the garage with his drum set that he bought. And then some random guy comes into the garage and says, "Hey, I'm just trying to look for the restroom." And then they just, in that moment, this random character and Craig have a impromptu small talk discussion, but it felt so real, like a genuine conversation that you have had in the past with somebody that you're just either meeting in an elevator or meeting in a hallway. What they're talking about is just so irrelevant, but it sounds so real, like a conversation that you have had. And then all of a sudden, this random character just says, "So how does it feel, man? How does it feel to have basically lost your wife in the sewers and try to kill her?" And then like it just the conversation completely flips on its head. And then even Craig is like so confused, and then he just starts yelling. It's like, "I don't even know who you are, man. Like, who are you?" And so it's just that whole conversation was probably the pinnacle of where I was laughing the most because it just came out of nowhere from just an impromptu small talk. So that is my favorite scene, and that's where the award goes to. And then the final award for best shot and frame. This one, there's obviously a lot of different types of shots that you guys might enjoy. This one, again, this film is, not very cinematic. It has some cool framings and how it follows some of the characters. But my favorite shot is actually when you have Austin and Craig. They are at their peak in regards to their relationship, and they're in the sewers. And from the sewers, Austin actually leads Craig through City Hall, and they're able to go to the roof of City Hall and just see the entire city. And just that one shot, you're just seeing the backs of Austin and Craig. They're just having the time of their lives, smoking a cigarette, and then you can just see the city of Colorado or wherever they're living at nighttime. And so that one shot looks really cool. So that's going to be my favorite shot of Friendship. All right, let's go ahead now and move in to the last segment, which is Friendship timeless? Can I see myself rewatching this movie various different times in the future? I have been debating this one in my own head, deciding whether this film is timeless. I do feel like comedies have a little bit of leeway. So, what I mean by that is comedies, the story does not have to be perfect. There could be various flaws in a comedy, but because of the moments that make you laugh and just continue to think about those hilarious scenes, that could push those types of movies to become timeless. And so I got to say that as of today, Friendship is a timeless movie for me. Although I didn't pinpoint any kind of nitpicks or flaws, again, it's not a perfect movie. It's not the funniest movie I've ever seen in my life, but it's just so refreshing to see a comedy like this where there's just so many awkward and I guess I'll say it again, socially awkward situations that, again, it shouldn't work for me. I don't like that type of humor. I don't like that type of comedy. Yet I just kept wanting to see more of what Craig was going to do, what he was going to say, and how he was just going to almost outdo himself by saying even more cringy stuff. So I can't wait to watch it again. I'm going to recommend this to friends to check this out. And I recommend you guys that are listening, definitely, if you have not seen this movie and you for some reason stayed and got spoiled by everything that I said, definitely check out Friendship. It is an awesome movie. All right, everybody. Thank you to those that stayed all the way through to listen to my full thoughts of Friendship. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 131 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new movie that comes out in streaming or in theaters. We break it down and then we consider if it is timeless. All right, guys. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you guys later.